everyone, and welcome to the Unlearning series. I'm Estrella, and this is
Henry-Cameron Allen.
okay. And today we are going to talk about relationships. One of my favorite topics.
Yay.
Henry, would you like to get started? What is it so interesting about relationship that people want to just talk about it all the time?
Well, I think that we are universally spoon-fed fairy tales. And I've yet to meet a parent who sits down with their child and closes the book and says, now, this is a fairy tale for a reason. This is a fantasy. It's not reality. Relationships are hard work. And, you know, just remember that, kids. You know?
Well, our viewers are only mature kids too, right? I mean, they're
Well,
not
but we
just
all have
kids.
that we all have that inner child that
Yeah.
remembers those fairy tales. And I find that in many romantic relationships, there's an expectation that one's partner is going to live up to the fantasy. And I'll tell you, from where I sit, Prince Charming is impossible. It's an impossible standard to live up to, as is Princess Charming. And so, no matter if it's a prince and a princess, or two princesses or two princes, we are all read the same fairy tales of happily ever after, castle in the clouds. And I think that we have to come back to that conversation at some point because, relationships are it takes skill. It takes listening, it takes communication, emotional literacy.
Yes, yes, yes. And as a child, I used to, and I don't know why my parents allowed me to see this, but they allowed me to watch telenovelas. Now, you know that there's an awful lot of drama, romance, and drama involved. And I
Yeah.
think as we watch, and even as adults, if we watch a lot of the drama on television, I think it affects us in some ways. Do you not
Oh,
think
yeah.
so?
I remember my mom watching All My Children, what was the other one? Like Sands Through the Hourglass. So are the
Well,
days of our lives. You know? And even when I was in boarding school, I went to an all boys boarding school and it was a jock school. It was very sports oriented, macho. There was more testosterone flowing through the halls and dormitories of this boarding school than you can imagine. And yet, at the same time, every day, the TV room would be packed with these butch football players watching General Hospital. So it's not just women getting Sábado Gigante, it's everybody getting these messages that are, we assimilate, then we bring into our expectations of partners. And I think that, yeah, I think that deficiency in skills is really what can
yeah,
challenge a lot of relationships.
absolutely. Well, you take two people from different walks of life, different upbringing, different family backgrounds, and they try to make it together as a unit. And yes, I think that many times we are unprepared for the reality that awaits us. Okay. Because it is true that getting along, period, with others can be very challenging. Imagine waking up to the same person every single day
That
and
was the
watching
expectation.
them, and I'm talking vice versa because it's not men. It's women too that have those issues. We have a bad day. We don't know how to release that in a positive way. We come home and sometimes we just unleash on the innocent bystander that happens to be the other person. Okay, the partner, the husband, the wife. And so it has a lot to do with communication. We
Yeah.
have to learn to communicate in ways that are not threatening or offensive? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's that sensitivity that has to be there, and really learning communication skills, learning emotional literacy, learning how to be a good listener. Um, I think that we don't get those skills. The first, you know, first layer of skill building is almost 100% put on parents. We are our children's first teachers. And so they're watching and they're learning, even things that go unspoken, they're observing dynamics between their parents and sort of assessing, engaging, and all of that. And I think that there are some people who are very direct. There are some people who talk to another person because they can't figure out what to do about their crappy day, right? Or if they have a problem. And
Therapist, yeah.
right. And they want feedback. There are some people who just need to rehearse their feelings and get it out on the table and talk about it. And I think that's where a lot of couples get into dynamics, because if you have one partner who is the kind of person that needs to communicate their feelings, even if they don't want feedback, they just need to spill it, vent. And then the other partner maybe internalizes and processes inside of themselves before they are able to talk about it. And then the other partner says, well, you just talk about it, you'll feel better, right? And so we have these unrealistic expectations without understanding that people communicate differently. People process things differently, their emotions. Yeah.
It has a lot to do with the emotional makeup of the person. Okay. And some are more communicative than others. Others kind of shut down because they don't know. They have to learn how to express themselves. And I think we put too much pressure on parents. I mean, I am not a perfect parent by no means. And but I think parents are all only able to share what the knowledge that they received as children, and maybe as adults they might have learned other skills, but I think that we are all limited based on the exposure, education, our ability to communicate. And the ability to communicate is also a learned skill. It's not something that we just were born with it and I've seen children that, my gosh, they talk the ears of a brass monkey. I am not kidding you. But they know for some reason they have that skill. How did they arrive? And at age 4, they're able to talk like that and communicate? I don't know. But there are adults that are unable to come to that point. And is it fear? Is it,
Fear is born out of ignorance,
well,
right?
yeah.
Fear what
Hmm.
we don't know.
We don't know. Yeah. Yeah. That's
And
true.
very often, because these things, I don't know that I necessarily agree that communication is not inherent to every human being. I really think that it's a universal life skill that every single human being is going to, in one measure or another, learn how to communicate. It's not about whether they're learning how, it's how well are they learning those skills and from whom, right? So a lot of these things, a lot of these deficiencies are generational. They're passed on from one generation to the next with expectations. You may be a child growing up in a household where children are to be seen and not heard. And so you are constantly, you are constantly invalidated, right?
Constantly,
And
constantly.
it's not a safe environment to communicate in. And
Mm.
so if a child isn't growing up in a fertile environment to have the freedom to experiment with communication, right? I don't believe in failure or mistakes. It's experimentation. And children, I mean, they'll open the fridge, get a carton of eggs and smash them all on the ground and wonder what all that gooey stuff is. They're going to be experimenting with everything. right? That's why little toddlers will pull a lamp off of a table or climb to the highest heights, and of course the parents turn around and freak out. And so it's in the parental responses as well to the experimentation of children that can affect their skill level in their ability to communicate. How are the parents communicating? And parents are expected to teach our children universal life skills. Most parents are deficient. So what do? We rely on school to take up the slack. Schools are wildly famous for being deficient in universal life skills education. And
especially
so
now.
what does
Yeah.
the school do when they can't meet the proficiency that children need? They turn to the government. Let's not even go there. I mean,
No,
so where are young people getting their skills from?
friends,
They're getting it from friends. Now they're getting it from social media. There's
television.
a YouTube video for everything and a TikTok that's 30 seconds, and a lot of misinformation is out there. And there's very little mentorship and guidance happening. Years ago, I was working in a high school. I was an educator and administrator, and it was a small school, urban youth, and it was kind of a school of last resorts for a lot of these kids because they just were outcasts, misfits. And so in that sense, there was a lot of opportunity for growth. And we made a decision as a faculty that we would put in place a mentorship circle for every single student in the school that was comprised of the student, their class guardian, or their homeroom teacher, kind of, who was keeping track of their academic and social progress, and the students' parents or guardians. So that was the circle, and it included the student, and they had an equal place at the table to talk about what they felt their needs were, and how could we, as the adults in their lives, guiding them through these very intense 4 years of high school, how could we support them in the best way possible? And so we would meet monthly, or sometimes, depending on schedules, biannually, right? Or at the end of every semester, we'd have a check-in. And it was so healthy. And I feel that it really gave these young people a platform to explore, a safe environment to experiment with their feelings and communicate. Because you've got hormones raging in the middle of all that, everything. Um, and I wish that there were more of that happening in the educational system that included parents. Parents need to back off when they're in high school, when their kids are in high school, right? During those formative years, they have
They
to be the ones
need,
setting the boundaries.
right,
If you
right,
set
right.
a boundary for a teenager, they're going to kick it right down, right?
Yes, I
So
did.
the
I
approach
did.
has to be very, very different.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
no longer the rule setter.
Right, right. And also, Henry, families face so many economical challenges. I
Yeah.
have known families. I mean, I remember this one family, and I'm not going to say where I met them, but they were young and they had a baby. And they both worked at the same place. Well, they both got up very, very early, left the house at 5 o'clock in the morning to take their baby to her mom's, who was going to babysit the baby. They got to work at 7, to start at 7, and they would work until 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, they would get in the car, go to the mother's, pick up the baby, go home, fix dinner, clean house, take care of the baby. There isn't enough time for working middle class, lower middle class people to take care of their basic needs, let alone have the energy left over to help a child with the homework. I
Well,
mean, unbelievable nowadays. And yes, it's a shame though that we have to leave it to the community to take care of that. I think it's a shame because there has to be a better way where families can have a life that is halfway enjoyable. I mean, that's free to be able to spend time together. and not be
Listen,
so exhausted.
let's rewind back 20,
Yes.
40, 50 years,
Oh, I remember.
right? Moms were at home generally. Not all moms, but most,
Not
I would
this
venture
one.
to say. There were a lot of moms in the
Yeah.
50s, right? And
In the
60s even,
50s, in the 50s,
right?
40s. Yeah.
Right? That they were expected to be the homemakers. They were home. The kids came home from school. There was somebody there to feed them a snack, to get them homework help and dinner. Dad went out to the bar after work with the guys, toss back a few. He'd come home. Many families wouldn't even eat supper together. The kids would go up to bed and have very little contact with their father, even on the weekends, right? Because dad would go golfing or fishing. Dad got downtime, mom did not. And yet, what did you see on television in those years? Right? Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, right? Where the mom is in her pearls and her crinolines and high heels vacuuming, I mean, it was this
Yeah.
idyllic sort of screwing with the American mind, American especially, but this was global, I think, um, to say that this is how your life should be. This is how your life should be. I remember going through a whole bunch of my mom's high school papers and stuff, and she had to do this scrapbook about her dream life. And it was exactly that. It was a handsome, wealthy husband, 2.2 kids, all the modern appliances in the kitchen, all that stuff. And it was the perfect picture of happiness. But it was the
Hmm.
fairy tale. It was the
My
fairy tale.
mother didn't work, and neither did the mothers in the community where we lived in Cuba. Okay. Just when they had to go somewhere, they were driven there,
Right.
but they didn't drive. My mother learned to drive when she was 45 years old,
Yeah.
and here in the States.
Yeah.
I always worked. I remember I worked from the time I was 14 years old. And that is because I hated to ask my father for money because he would sit me down and he would just interrogate me. Why
Yeah.
do you need it? Do you really need it? How much do you need it? You don't really need that much. By the time he got done, I didn't want to buy anything. I decided I better go to work. So that was not a good thing for me to go to work at such an early age. I became hyper independent. Okay. And
This was at a
I,
time when it wasn't until the mid 70s that women had the right to their own credit, their own bank account, their own credit cards, right? They couldn't get a driver's license without their husband's permission, right? This is the mid
yeah, I
70s. It was not
remember
that
all
long
of
ago.
those years. No wonder we're still a little bit on the angry side.
Just you think? I mean, but how do you think that affects relationships too? I
Um,
remember in the 70s, my mom going to
yeah,
work.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember how hard that was for her. She had no skills. And so she was walking down the street. I mean, she did everything from bag groceries to get chased around a desk as a secretary, trying to, please her boss. And she was walking down the street just devastated because she didn't feel that she fit anywhere. And I think a lot of women were feeling that way. And she walked by a travel agency and went in and said, I was the wife of a diplomat. I've traveled. My father was in the military. I've been to other countries, but I have no skills. If I do all your grunt work for 2 weeks, would you train me to be a travel agent? Because I think I'd be really good at it.
Wow.
That's
That's impressive.
right. And she
That's
did.
impressive. Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
saw her build her confidence. And eventually she had her own image studio that was helping women who were transitioning into the workforce to dress appropriately, put their hair and makeup and colors together, all that stuff. And she was a self-made woman. And I am still to
I
this day,
bet you were
so
very
proud,
proud of her. Yeah, yeah,
and it was an inspiration to me, even as a young man,
yeah.
to in my respect for women and what women were capable of, I knew from a young age, that was something you shouldn't shake a stick at.
That is a very good lesson that you were exposed to, because men at one time were really treating women like they did not have the right to anything except be home, cook meals, clean house, take care of the baby, and you know,
It's still happening here in
and
Spain. It's a very macho
well,
culture.
you don't have to go
Latin
that
America.
far. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where you live. It's far from me, but I'm here in Florida, and I will tell you that all of that is very cultural.
Yes.
Okay. It's a culture thing because it was like that in Cuba. And
Brazil,
I
all around.
Brazil is like that as well, I'm sure. But maybe a lot of the Spanish speaking countries, do you think that they're all like that? What about other cultures, other countries? Are they like that as well?
For sure, for sure. And, I have friends all over the world, on every continent. And
Right.
you look at the Middle East and you look at the state
Oh
of women.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Look at African women, who are really, I mean, they're making amazing strides, but the glass ceiling is thick globally. And
Mhm.
women have to fight twice as hard to break it and to break through. And I think that also affects dynamics in relationships.
Right. Why do you think that is happening? What has happened throughout the years, centuries, for men to believe that that is the way they must behave towards women?
It's what they
Ba-bang.
saw and were taught from their mothers
Well,
and their fathers,
mama, well, okay.
right? I mean,
Religion,
religion definitely. But if you go back to the world's ancient religions, pre-Christian, and you see that the levels that women were placed as goddesses, as priestesses, as queens, right? That women were recognized as powerful, and that threatened a lot of men, right? And so you think of the witch burnings, and you think of women who get to a certain age, right? Who get through or are on the other side of menopause, and they have
don't
some
talk
wisdom.
about that. That's another unlearning series.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's a whole other series. But there's been this threat that women who get older are carrying a whole lot of wisdom and a whole lot of survival.
We do.
Right?
We are goddesses. What are you talking about? I mean,
The queens,
seriously,
yes.
we are queens. No, seriously, I do believe. I mean, I see myself now today, and I look back 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I am a different person. And it's not because I learned it in a book. It's not because, other than I've experienced some things that molded me. They kind of maybe tamed me a little bit,
A little
right?
bit.
A little bit, just a little bit. So here we are, and I think that as a woman, I think that we are just as capable as a man is, and in some areas more so.
Yep, I agree with
Because,
that.
and not to be offensive to men that will listen to this, but some of them will even agree that we have the ability to multitask and focus. Okay, now I've lost a little bit of that with time, but I did. I could do multiple things at the same time and get it all done in one day without hyperventilating.
Right.
Okay, and so what is the problem then? I think it has to do with competition.
Well,
I
and it's
think,
also fear. Men don't understand what
Of course
happens
not.
in a woman's development. And I mean, we don't understand what's happening in our own development. 98.9% of the men that I talk to about andropause have no idea what it is. They've never heard of it. What is it? It's the male companion to menopause. It's not for the same reasons, obviously, but it is hormonal changes that happen as we age. And it starts in the 40s generally. I mean, there's some wiggle room on both sides. And it's a slow advancement of this diminishing of the hormones. And we go through a lot of similar symptoms, irritability, night sweats,
Really? Night
mood.
sweats
Yeah,
too.
night
Wow.
sweats too. But a woman's menopause comes on fast and strong. So it's a very different mechanism.
Oh, mine was not that way, but I don't want to get too personal
Was
here.
it? Well, but I mean, again, everybody's different. You can't paint everything with a
It
broad brush, but
started at 38 and it took 10 years.
was it slow or did it come on fast?
It was slow. It came on slow and it continued slow and very uncomfortable for about 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, mine, it just hit me in my mid 50s, right? Usually it happens a decade earlier or more. And but again, you can't broad stroke it. You can find some common threads in the experiences, but the point is that we go through these changes that we're not taught about. We go and how many couples are going through menopause and andropause, maybe even at the same time if they're close in age, and they don't understand what's going on hormonally, right? Because they've never been taught. Men have never been taught about women's hormones. Women have never been taught about men's hormones. Men have never been taught about men's hormones either, right? So there's all of this mess that's going on that's akin to what we go through hormonally when we're teenagers. It's a lot of confusion and a lack of guidance and a lack of mentorship through that process. I'm working on a project right now I'm calling Agecation. And it's all about this learning the skills at every stage of life, from early childhood through senior, about the process of aging and aging well, right? If we can remove those stones out of the path from an early age, I think that by the time young people start to get into relationships, intimate relationships, they're going to have a better handle on it because they're understanding what's going on in them and what may be going on in their partner, and they can hold space for one another. I see a great lack of that in the world.
I
So,
see a great lack of that in the world as well. And I think a lot of what we go through is the image that we have been, I guess, brainwashed or taught to project. That may not be the right image, especially women. You know, we are affected by the way we look because we're supposed to look a certain way and or were at one time supposed to look a certain way. And
mhm.
so that becomes an issue with us, with other women, because women look at other women too. We want to see, okay, what is she doing that I need to do? Or I
Yeah,
would like to do what she's doing, and it doesn't always
I've
turn
heard
out.
that women don't dress up for men. They dress up for other
That's
women.
true. That's exactly the way it is. And just watch, observe women passing one another, and if they both look great, they smile like saying, "Oh, I give you my approval. You look great." But that is the way it is. And we need to learn to just be comfortable in our own skin, that aging is not a problem, is not bad, it's not, it just is. It's part of the cycle that all of us are going through one
And I
day.
think that as we age,
Mhm.
we don't feel personality wise really any different than we did
Feels
when we
this.
were in our 20s. But
Yeah.
gravity is taking hold,
Don't talk
and
about gravity.
we can still no, but we have to if we're talking about relationships. There's a lot of infidelity in relationships as well. I've never understood. I witnessed it in my parents, on both sides, but I never understood how two people can come together and stand at an altar and make vows to one another for better or worse, sickness and health, rich or poor, all that stuff, and step out of their relationship and mess around with somebody else without talking to their partner first. I mean, I'm all for, if people choose to have an open relationship, do it. But it has to be communication between both, an agreement between both. And if there's not an agreement, say she wants to have an open relationship and her partner doesn't, well, then go get counseling and work it out.
Exactly, exactly.
But talk to
Uh,
each other about it.
yeah, yeah. Um, I think that part of that issue has to do with it doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a period of time of being hurt, being not heard, being not having our feelings and concerns validated. And over a period of time, when a person is not validated, they're not really considered in decision making, it starts chipping away at it
Sure.
little by little by little. And neither partner may be aware. And if they're aware, they're so angry that they're just allowing things to get worse, to worsen. Okay.
Right.
And I don't, I can't judge or say anything about that because it happened in my family. And
Mhm.
so there are sometimes a number of issues that, and I'm not by any means condoning it. It's just that I'd like to be able to understand it a
Yeah.
little bit better. Uh, Going back to relationships, and you were talking about younger people, and I think you were talking about younger people going to relationships and all of that. Here
Mhm.
is a concern that I have now as an older person. I can see it, whereas when I was 17 or 18, I couldn't see it if you pushed me towards it.
Right.
But I think that they respond physically too quickly to a physical attraction. Okay. Not
Yeah.
really understanding what that is. And I think it happens with adults too. Okay. They just get
Not just kids.
so
Yeah.
wrapped up in the physical that they don't realize that it's a lot more than just that. You have to communicate, you have to care for that person, you have to have compassion for that person, you have to be forgiving, you have to be a friend to that person. You're saying no, 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 no. What are you
I don't
saying?
think it's that way for everybody. I think there's
Well,
some people
maybe.
they're swinging, they are, leading with their pelvis. They're just that way. And it's okay to be who you are.
That's what they
But
used to call Elvis the pelvis.
pelvis to pelvis, but don't get into a relationship with somebody who is not copacetic with that, because
Right, 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 right.
two people can't grow and develop and change on a parallel plane their entire lives. If you take two plants and stick them in the same pot and you try and train them up the wall, right, or up a stick to where you're forcing the growth to be parallel, you're going to have weak plants and they're not going to survive. There's a whole lot of wonky plants like to follow the light, and they like to do all this, they change and they grow in different ways. And unless a relationship can accommodate that wonkiness, then it's almost doomed from the beginning to fall prey to the structuring, the overstructuring. So I think that there are people who are totally happy having lovers, not getting involved. They don't have to care about somebody. It's just about
Okay.
Mr. Right now versus Mr. Right, right? But I think as we get older, this is something that I was going to earlier, is that as gravity takes hold, and we may be in a partnership, and we may feel inwardly the same person, we may feel energetic and vital and sexual and all that stuff, and we can look at somebody who's younger, who's attractive, who's fit, who's vital, and have the same kind of reaction, the same kind of feelings, but they don't even look at us. They don't see us, right?
They
And
just see the outer.
they just see the outer.
Yeah.
And then we look in the mirrors, we see
Mhm,
that reflected, whatever
mhm,
that look is. I mean, there are some
mhm.
people, young people, who like older people. Big book,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
age is a number. But I also think that it's very easy for those of us who are getting into our autumn or golden years to not only see ourselves reflected through the eyes of younger people, but
I don't know
also
that that's
in
essential.
the
Yeah.
mirror. In the
Yeah,
mirror.
we have
We
to
have to
really
take
look at
stock of it.
ourselves. Look at
Yeah.
ourselves. Look at what it is, because I know at this point in my life, what I want now is so different from what I wanted, 20, 30 years ago. And so I guess my life, the way it is right now, let me put it this way, it's going to get better.
Mhm.
It's going to get better in the areas where I am focused on to make choices that are better for me. Whereas before, years ago, I probably didn't have the courage to make those choices.
Yeah. And being a romantic too.
Oh,
When you
yeah.
find somebody, I just wrote a song about this that I'm working on.
Okay.
And it's one of these, it's like a story in 3 acts, right? Theater guy.
Yeah.
And the first act is you fall head over heels in love with somebody who is not available,
Oh,
who
yes, I know.
may engage with you
Yeah.
and love on you, but they don't say the words. And it doesn't matter. I don't need to hear the words. I know. He looks into my eyes and it's gospel, right? I mean, I see it. I don't have to hear it, right? But then over time, it's like, it'd be nice to hear I love you now and then. And then it's like
Get a parent and train it.
they pull away, they pull away, they pull away. The void gets thicker.
Yeah.
They're not at
Yeah.
home as much anymore. Maybe they go, travel or whatever on business trips or whatever, they're gone. And then they come back and you really feel that void in between. And at the end of this song, the protagonist, the one who's singing the story, who's you're on the journey with, it's like
Right.
at first,
Right.
it doesn't matter if they say it. Then it'd be nice to hear it once in a while. And then there has to come a point where you acknowledge what is really, the lyric is oh, it'll come back to, I just wrote it, so I'm just like, it's not fresh in my mind, but it's something about harmony demands a duet.
And yes, harmony does and I don't think, well, this is how I feel that as a person, I mean, I don't want to settle for anything less. And none of us should have to
Compromise,
settle.
right?
Huh? Well, it's a
Compromise.
compromise. It's a set because the other person is not even aware. They're not probably settling, or we're the ones. We become aware. Like in the song, we are aware of what is lacking, what is missing. Do I
Correct.
want to spend the rest of my life like that? No,
No, and so you have to
no,
release because you
no.
love the other person. You have to
Yeah,
release them, not judge them,
no, not judging, but release
because
them.
if they're not capable of giving you what you need in order to thrive, then with love, you must release them. And that's a hard thing to come
It's
to.
a
And so
oh,
it's really
it's
it's a,
painful.
it's a
I've done
triumphant
it.
song at
I
the end.
have done it, and it is very painful to release someone that you love because they don't always come back. And that's okay. That's part of the
Yeah.
journey. That's part of
Yeah.
the journey, that you have to, when you release someone, you know that it can go so many different ways, but you are okay with whatever comes,
Right.
whatever happens. So
It
yes,
has to be. It has to
yeah, yeah, it's definitely something. And you said something, and I just thought about um, what about abusive relationships?
be.
You
Mhm.
know, I think this is worth discussing here.
Yeah.
I remember years and years ago, I had a friend who lived in another town, and she was of a particular faith, and her husband was not a participant. Okay, he did his own thing. And every time that she would do something that was not pleasing to him, he would get physically abusive with her. And
Yeah.
at times I would see her and her face would be totally black and blue.
Yeah.
And the only reason that she stayed with him was because of her faith. I never quite understood that. Okay. I would not be able to have that kind of endurance or patience or love, even love for that person.
Yeah.
What about those kinds of relationships? I mean,
It's
we're not
so
talking about an open marriage
no, no, no.
here. I
It's
mean, it's a destructive marriage or
oh yeah, and
partnership.
I know men who have been in relationships with women, and it was the same thing. They beat the crap out of them,
Yeah.
through kids and things like that. I just watched an interesting documentary. I can't remember what station or what
You
platform.
notice that you and I are not remembering a lot of things.
Hired. It's festival week. Um, it was about Elizabeth Taylor, and these were some
Okay.
tapes that were discovered in an interview with her. And she was talking about all her marriages and all her relationships and stuff. And some of them were pretty volatile. And she talked about her need for a man to dominate her.
Ah, but that was a different era.
Well, yes and no. I think there are still people like that who for some reason, whether it's looking for a father figure, whether it's looking for something that was missing, whether it's a sense of being out of control and needing someone to rein them in, and put that form around them to keep
Hmm.
them spinning off. I know men and women like this, and it's such again, it's one of those topics that you can't broad brush because it's so nuanced and it's so specific and unique to the individual. You do see some patterns that you can kind of, relate them to one another. And a lot of it is, low self-image, you know, feeling like you don't deserve better. It depends on what the messaging was your whole life. And every one of us has an inner child that didn't get what they needed. And at some point, we have an opportunity to reparent that inner child and reassure that inner child and find a way to self-parent today, right now, and to check in with that little kid. Are you okay? Because a lot of people who fall into what we would call abusive relationships, um, I call them political relationships, not government politics, but human politics. How do we treat one another? How do we include one another? And how do we label one another and ourselves?
Oh, we are definitely going to talk about that because that is going to be, and maybe another time. But yeah, those labels, I think they are very restrictive. And I mean, as a woman, I like to make my own choices, but every now and then I like to see the other person make the choice.
I know that
Okay.
about
Because I, you know that, because I do want to go along, and
you.
there are times that I don't, and I've told you this, there are times that I'm okay with everything and I'm okay with going here and I'm okay with doing that. And there are times that I have no need to have my way. I'll just go there.
Well,
And
and
I'm
that's
like
really
that with all of my friends. Yeah.
in terms of relationship dynamics, and relationships could be friends, it could be family, it could be
Yeah.
partner,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? I think, again, the communication is really important because when I have a friend who says, well, I don't care, I'll just do whatever you pick, right? And then all the pressure is on me to please the other person and to come up with something that's going to be agreeable. And if it's not,
Yeah. Yeah.
then I feel guilty or I feel shame or I feel whatever I feel that I wasn't able to live up to the trust that my friend has put in me, to make
Well,
that choice on their behalf. That's an awkward position for a lot of people.
well, let
That's
me put it this way. If a friend trusts me to do something, and I do that to the best of my ability, and I try to receive feedback, and the feedback is, oh, it doesn't matter, do whatever. And then I do whatever, and that friend comes back with some kind of criticism, that
right.
is not a real friend.
But you're
Okay.
also
And
you're
to me, that
yeah,
is abusive because that person gives us all of that power. And
yes.
then they just,
That's in psychological terms, that's called
yeah,
it's called a double bind.
yes,
Right?
yes,
You're
yeah,
damned if you do,
that's
and you're
not right.
damned if you're
And
damned if you don't.
exactly. And so, I mean, I've been in those kind of situations,
Yep.
and I'm not very passive. I will be vocal in a case like that, and it doesn't always end well. but
Well, but
I can't be quiet,
it's a learning
because
experience for both, right?
yeah,
It
yeah,
was what it had to be. And very
yeah,
often, unresolved issues within ourselves are what bring up those moments. And so my grandmother had the best saying, when you point a finger at somebody else, you got three pointing back at yourself,
that is true.
right? It's true every time.
And one undecided.
And one undecided, well, in my case, it's still pointing back at me. But it's really about checking yourself and your own reactions versus blaming another. Because if you are checking in with yourself and you're saying, why am I triggered by that? What is it about that person, that moment, that response in the other person who's just being who they are that comes, that brings something up in me, right? I have to check myself. I love that expression, check yourself or you wreck yourself.
That is true.
It's
That is
really
very true.
being grounded, being centered in who you are. No, even over the Oracle of Delphi, it says, know thyself.
Know thyself.
Know what makes you tick. And I think that is also key to being in a relationship because very often somebody can't learn what you know about you by osmosis. You have
Very
to teach
true.
them who you
Very
are.
true.
I can't remember who said it, Maya Angelou or somebody. When somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Um,
Someone that was very wise because it's really true. It's
yeah,
really true. And I think even before we embark in a relationship, I think that there are little things that we're able to learn about that person. We
yeah.
either like that or we don't. Do we choose to ignore it or what? And I think 9 times out of 10, we just choose to ignore it.
Or we assume, we
Or we
make
assume that
assumptions,
that person, yeah,
right? Rather
will,
than ask the person, take the risk, build the trust
right.
by taking the risk to ask. If you have a question about somebody's motives, if you have a question about a friend, a developing friendship, you're building trust, right? What's the worst that can happen if you ask what you don't know,
Well,
right?
we are afraid of getting the truth that we don't want to hear
Fear is born
because
of ignorance.
we have expectations and we're expecting that, hey, I'm wrong. That's the problem. We don't trust ourselves to be
Well,
right.
I believe, and you've heard me talk about this before, I believe that there's one frequency that exists. There's no hierarchy of higher or lower frequencies. There's one frequency, and it's love. and it operates at different intensities depending on the receiver, right? You're the receiver and you're the amplifier of love,
Right.
right? And you're in control of how you receive and how you amplify. And so it's all about intensities of love, right? And some
And
people
yeah,
are operating at a more intense level than others that are operating at a weak level. And you usually can sense when the frequencies match. It's a
you can
feeling.
feel it. You can feel it. You
But
can
in
feel
order
it.
for frequency to even move, in order for love to move between two people, whether they're partners, friends, parents, kids, anybody, trust is the energy that moves the frequency. We need the trust to be there. We need to trust ourselves. We need to learn and earn the trust of other people. We also have to be confident in our trustworthiness.
Exactly. Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely.
That's what I have to say about that.
Very good. And should we just leave it at this? I think so.
That's a good button, I think. We're
I
about time,
think
right?
this has been a wonderful time sharing with you all
Like,
about, well, no, I think we just touched the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that I know that we can say, but we need another time, don't
well,
we?
yeah, and those of you that are watching, put in the comments below if there's a topic that you want us to talk about or address. If you enjoy the way we communicate, and our banter is very organic.
We
There's
enjoy
nothing
it.
prepared. I mean, we didn't prepare a
We
thing.
enjoy it.
I loved it. I love this kind of thing. And but if this brings up something in you, if you have something to say about it, put it in the comments. If you have a question for another episode, make a suggestion in the comments,
Make a
because that's the way
suggestion.
we're going to interact and engage with our audience, hopefully, and build a conversation. This isn't just two talking heads. This is really a dialogue that we are building, a following, an audience of people who are on the frequency that we're on. That's all it
That's
is.
it. Very true. Very true. A dialogue between friends. And absolutely, we are
And a whole lot of unlearning. A
we're
whole
almost
lot of
always on
unlearning.
the same page. So
That's
I'm
right.
really happy that we did this, Henry.
Me too. Thank you,
So
Estrella.
to the listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to do this again, maybe in a month, maybe sooner. I don't know, but we'll be back. That is
We'll
a
be
sure
back.
thing.
And go find something to unlearn. We talked a lot
That's
about
right.
unlearning old messages, old habits, right? What do you have to unlearn? That's a good reflection.
Oh, that sure is. Okay, folks, we'll see you next time.
Bye.